Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here. A special episode of Meaningful Live. Special, we'll call it pre-Purim episode. We'll speak about those who stand for nothing fall for anything. This program is dedicated by Jordan Weingarten in loving memory of his paternal grandmother, Terry Weingarten. In a world like ours today, where it's pretty obvious that there's a lack of a moral compass, call it moral certainty. What values do we stand for? I mean, you have such polarization and extremes, where what someone calls day, other person calls night. Someone calls good, another person calls evil. Not just ambiguity. Something is missing. So I thought it's important to talk about this topic. And especially it is related that we can learn tremendous lessons from the story of Purim regarding this. And I think a good place to begin, I remember a talk I gave to a group. It was COVID time. It was almost around 5 years ago, actually. Around, I think, April or May. So all the schools were closed in April, May 2020. Around March is when COVID really became serious. It began, that's why it's called COVID-19. It began in 2019, but 2020. And being the schools were closed, someone who knew me from the Board of Education asked if I would do a Zoom with students across the country. It was over 1,000 students. Young men and women aged, I would say, 14 to 17. And being that Zoom also has the capacity to chat, so I decided to do like a mini, not a scientific, but a mini survey, ask questions. And I asked this following question. A question I had asked many young people, and not only many young people, many people of our time. What are the single most important issues in your life? And specifically pre-COVID. And the answers were people responded. The high-level answers, most answers were sports, sexuality, or sex as they put it, entertainment, things like that. Education, some of them put in there. The second question I asked was, what about after COVID? So there was a shift. Family, values, because now suddenly our comfort zones and security blankets were stripped. And then I asked the final question. Name one thing you were ready to die for. And I didn't mean physically die, something you're ready to fight for all the way. You know what most answers were? I can't come up with anything. A few people wrote that my football team should win the Super Bowl. Was that half facetious? Or was that to be humorous? I don't know. But now what did that indicate? So I defined it as actually a blessing, which is also a curse. The blessing of comforts, of leisure, of a sense of entitlement, freedom. The downside of that is an apathy that settles in. We take for granted. We don't have to fight for anything. When's the last time the young men and women in the United States, or for that matter, most of the free world, really had to fight for something? Even the wars that have been fought in Europe, not in the U.S. mainland, unless the Civil War was the last war fought here. I'm not advocating war. I'm not trying to suggest we go back, turn the clock back. But important to emphasize, what do we stand for? So it's a blessing when you could say, I stand for having a new smartphone, a new video game, a new girlfriend, a new boyfriend, a new, what I said, sports, music. That was also one of the top ones. Now, I think we all understand there's something really problematic when you cannot define what you're ready to fight for. Like if someone said, I'm ready to fight for freedom. Why do I have to fight for freedom? I take it for granted. But our parents and grandparents, my parents for sure, they grew up in the former Soviet Union under Stalin. Many people were Holocaust survivors. They not only did they have to fight for freedom, they died for freedom. And they actually ended up without freedom. So it brought me to the big question, going back to the title of what we're discussing here. If you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. No question about that. Those who stand for nothing fall for anything. Because then you have nothing to compare to. What's your foundation? You have no foundation. So every day someone can sell you another foundation. That's why I think, even though marketing has its value, but you can market and sell anything to anybody if they don't stand for something. This is one of the crises of our times, maybe one of the biggest ones. I know it's not war, fighting a war, a physical war, it's not dangerous, but all infections, God forbid, don't begin with being life-threatening. They begin with a small little infection that begins to fester. This issue, a person doesn't stand for something, the consequences of that can be. Then there's a vacuum. And then you look, because a human being by nature needs a passion, needs a cause. So you begin replacing it by unhealthy causes, unhealthy passions. Anything that will somewhat relieve that existential restlessness that human beings have. So if it's values, eternal values, if it's things that are worth fighting for, then you become a very different person. It creates focus. It's connected very much to the same question. Do you think you are dispensable? If you feel you're dispensable, you're one person among 8 billion people on this planet, what's one grain of sand on a beach with billions, if not trillions of grains of sand? But when you understand that you have value and that you matter, then your choices matter. So it affects really the very core essence of who we are. When Mordechai refused to bow to Haman in the story of Purim, people don't appreciate. Yes, it's very noble, very inspiring. A person stood up, everybody bowed to him, one person refused to bow. But it's a far deeper thing. He was making a statement for then and for generations that I stand for something. I don't bow because everyone's bowing. I don't conform because everyone's conforming. There's no herd mentality. I'm an individual and I have a faith and I have values and ideals that I believe in that I will not compromise. I don't know if you've ever thought of this. If you were under duress, and God forbid, no one should ever be under duress, being tortured, or in an avalanche, and you're dying from hunger, would you resort to cannibalism? Would you turn on somebody, especially a loved one, to save your own skin? No one should ever be tested, but people, unfortunately, that's what's happened. People who never would have imagined they would do certain things became capos during the Holocaust, turning on their own people just to think they can save their skin for a few more minutes. In the words of Churchill, appeasement to the enemy is like feeding the crocodiles in the hope you'll be eaten last. People have turned, became informers. My father used to tell me how in the Soviet Union, Stalin had this climate of fear. And the biggest fear he wanted was to destroy the family unit, that you can't trust your own brothers and sisters and parents and children. And how do you do that? By everybody feeling afraid. Maybe they became an informer. So they would arrest someone, torture them, and say, we'll let you go back. Live in peace. Just tell us who's doing what, who goes here, who goes there. Be an informer. And people became informers. And some people didn't. I know my grandfather, my namesake, I never met him. He was arrested and almost died in Siberia. He did come out. He died a young man, early 50s, in Toronto. But he was tortured. I don't want to even describe in graphic detail the extent of his torture. They wanted him to be an informer, but his spirit didn't allow him to do that. Some people will not turn in someone, even if no one's watching and no one will know. So again, none of us should ever be tested. And thank God we're not tested in that way. But you start seeing what a person is like. What do you stand for? It's easy to speak about what you stand for when you're sitting at and enjoying life. The truth is, that's when we don't really know what we stand for, but it's easy to talk about it. It's a whole other story when you're under real pressure, when there are real stakes, and you're being told, no problem, no one will know, just do this and that, something unethical. I'm someone that trusts you, or you trust, or you trusted. So Purim is a good time of the year to ask ourselves what we stand for, what we're ready to fight for. Because yes, those who stand for nothing will fall for anything. And you see that today. The gullible, the vulnerable. Because what's the competition? There are people I know, doesn't matter how much money you gave them, no matter what kind of incentives, certain things they would never compromise. It's not even on the table. Someone say, well, give them some more money. Yeah, people who can be bought feel that everybody else can be bought. Is it a majority of people? Unfortunately, probably not. But there are people like that. And those are the people that you can really trust. People who have that steadfast, that absolutely commitment. I look around today, you see people, the usual situations where there should be love and nurturing, homes and families, and yet there's abuse. A parent can abuse a child. A sibling can abuse another sibling. Friends can do the same, bullying and so on. And you think to yourself, how is that possible? It goes against the very biological connection that people who love each other shouldn't be capable of doing anything like that. And yet we see it time and again. And I think it goes back to the same root. What do you stand for? Someone who's not capable of hurting another person because they believe in it, they're ready to fight for it, doesn't matter. They would not do it just because they have a moment of weakness. Now, none of us are perfect. That's not what we're suggesting. It's what are those values? I deal with many young people who are having difficulty finding their soulmate. I can't find the right person. And I always ask the same question. Tell me the 3 most important things that you need in a soulmate. And it's sad to say, in most cases, they're all, maybe, I can't say have no value, but they're all superficial things. Looks, money, opportunity, having fun. It's important to have someone that looks good, that you're attracted to. I understand that. And money helps, and so on. But if someone doesn't say, someone I can trust, a loving person, a kind person, someone that will be a good parent, someone that has values, it's not even mentioned. You want to mention other things, fine, but that tells me that we're in a society where, again, comforts have turned into apathy. And we therefore don't crystallize our values because we don't have to. Warren Buffett famously said, until the tide is out, you don't know who's been swimming naked. The tide is in, everybody's riding high. When the lights begin to dim, that's when you start seeing the cracks. You want to know what a person is like? It's like a tea bag. You don't know how strong it is until you're put into hot water. Again, nobody should be put into hot water. Nobody should ever have to suffer. But that's one of the ways that exposes things. Even in science, you really want to test something, you have to put it under extreme situations, extreme cold, extreme heat, extreme speed. Because then you really see what it's made of. So I would suggest just do it to yourself. Hopefully it doesn't have to happen from outside of you. Impose upon yourself certain pressures. Ask yourself, what do you stand for? What would you not bow down to? Or would you bow to everything? Because you don't stand for anything. Now the fact is, the Talmud puts it this way. Unfortunately, and it's such a sad statement, people will forego eternal goodness for temporary pleasure, for instant gratification. The expression is, they prefer Chaya Shah over Chaya Olam. Life for the moment than life forever. Someone came to, this is statistics, offered you $10,000 right now, or $100,000 over 10 years. Most people would go for the 10 now. because they don't know what's going to happen or the different reasons. Again, I don't know the exact numbers and so on. There's something about us seeing the moment and not understanding the longer narrative, the bigger picture. We want quick results, especially in our instant or fast food generation. But the most important things in life don't come quickly. They're a process. Can you pull a flower out of the ground? Can a caterpillar turn into a butterfly because you just want to do so, because you pressed a button? Can a child can a fetus, a newborn conceived fetus turn into a child in a day, in 2 days? No, 9 months. It's a process. And it emerges. The flower will emerge. Water the flower. Do what you have to do and it will emerge. So the respect for the process and for the emergence of things, instead of conquering them, instead of acquiring them, instead of fixing it, instead of making it happen, it will happen if you do what you have to do right. This is all part of the same mentality of a generation. Because of our blessings, we can lose sight of the things that are most valuable. When people ask me about AI, I say AI, like all technology, it's a tool. Junk in, junk out. If you're a robot, and that's what you think you are, AI will be a better robot than you, ultimately. Maybe not so ultimate, pretty soon, already there. But if you're a soul, if you have a heart, and that's the horizons you try to continuously grow on. Yeah, AI can emulate, but cannot innovate quite that way. Some argue that it can learn emotions too, and it can learn a soul too. It's another discussion. My point that I'm making here is that it all comes down to what our standards are, what our values are. So it begins with you. And then the tools out there can help enhance that. If you have good values, those tools will enhance. If you have a good relationship with someone, so yes, technology can help enhance that relationship. You could communicate faster, long distances, and so on. But if you don't have a relationship with someone, just because you have a phone, a smartphone, you can communicate or watch someone a million miles away, doesn't mean you're going to build a relationship that way. You may, but it's all dependent on the relationship, not on the technology. But let's not digress. Getting back to the theme, critical in life. I would say as important as oxygen itself is to stand for something eternal, to have a mission, an indispensable mission in your life. And that's the best preventive and preemptive medicine to most of the maladies of our time. It's a guarantee, slam dunk, everything takes work. But it's a critical piece. So we hear the story, Mordechai refusing to bow. It's basically saying, if you don't stand for anything, you stand for nothing. Or you'll fall for, if you don't stand for anything, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything. It's important to get something that you stand for, those values. And you begin simply, sit down and begin writing a short list, the single most important things in your life. And I'll conclude with a great analogy. A professor was teaching a class in time management. And he went into his classroom, he was going to do a presentation, a demonstration. He brings in, with his assistants, they bring in a big empty aquarium. They set it in the middle of the room. And a few sacks, big sacks. Students don't know what's going on. He opens sack number 1 and it has big boulders, rocks. And he takes the rocks, he has his assistant help him, they put the rocks inside the aquarium. Okay, class, is this aquarium full? Well, on one hand it's full, it has all the rocks in it till the top, but it's not totally full. So they say, well, mostly, not entirely. Fine. Bag number 2, sack number 2, small stones, pebbles. And they pour the pebbles in, and they fill the whole aquarium till the top. Is it full now? Well, more students said, yes, seems full. Third sack, fine gravel. The fine gravel fills all the crevices that the pebbles didn't fill. Is it full now? Well, there was one more sack. It could be a trick sack. So some said yes, some said no. Most said yes. The last sack had pitchers of water. Of course, water is even finer than gravel. And they poured the water in until it was spilled over. So now you had the big rocks, small pebbles, the gravel, and the water. Is it full now? Yes. What do we learn from this demonstration? So it was a time management class. So a few of the smart Alex in the class said, very simple, that even if you think your day is full, you could always fill it more. In other words, you can always squeeze something else in, just like you could squeeze the pebbles and then the gravel and the water. There's always more you could add to your schedule. Time management. The professor, the teacher said no. That's a lesson, but there's a more important lesson. If you don't get the boulders in first, you're never going to get them in. If you began with the water, and then the gravel, and then the pebbles, how are you going to get the stones in? The stones are your values, are your unshakable ideals. They must go in first. And then you schedule your time. That's time management. Know what is absolutely necessary, and then add to the more things that are more optional or accessories, support. That's the lesson, my friends. Stand for something, and then you have a basis upon which to measure everything else. Those that don't stand for anything will fall for everything, or for anything. Be blessed and be well. Happy Purim. Simon Jacobson here. Please, if you've enjoyed this, subscribe to our offerings, to our YouTube channel. Share, and I'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts. Be well and be blessed.